Bang! Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's fist struck the committee table. A sharp, percussive sound that sent a sheaf of papers scattering like startled birds. This was not a gavel, it was a declaration of war. At 35, the congresswoman from New York's 14th district still wielded her fury like a finely honed weapon, commanding the room with the absolute, unshakable certainty of someone who truly believed they were an agent of historical righteousness. "You're a climate denier who abandoned Texas to freeze." The words cracked through the cavernous hearing room of the House Financial Services Committee like a bullwhip. This was more than an accusation, it was a performance. And the audience was primed. In the gallery, a sea of young progressives, many clad in the "tax the rich" t-shirts that served as their uniform, erupted in a perfectly coordinated, rhythmic chant. Shame, shame, shame. Camera flashes erupted, a strobe effect lighting the room like a summer storm. Each flash was another potential frame for the clip that Ocasio-Cortez was certain would go viral. This was the moment, the young revolutionary, the voice of a generation, finally holding the old guard accountable. Across from her, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas sat, an island of unnerving calm in her tempest. He calmly adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was the expression of a seasoned poker player holding 4 aces while his opponent furiously goes all in on a pair of 2s. As papers from AOC's dramatic gesture fluttered down around him like theatrical dying leaves, Cruz took his time, methodically cleaning his glasses with a handkerchief. Unhurried, unbothered. The room itself seemed to vibrate with a palpable tension. Every seat was filled, a partisan divide made visible. Ocasio-Cortez's supporters had arrived hours early, buzzing with anticipation, ready to watch their champion dismantle another conservative titan. Behind her, in perfect formation, stood her backup choir, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley. The squad, arrayed in solidarity, nodding like synchronized backup singers to her lead vocals. Their presence a force multiplier for the progressive base. Security officers, sensing something in the air beyond the usual political theater, had positioned themselves near the exits. The Republican members leaned back in their chairs, arms crossed, passing knowing smirks between them, the look of adults sharing a secret kept from an unruly child. The Democrats, by contrast, looked decidedly less comfortable. They suddenly found their phones, their notes, the ceiling tiles, anything, to be utterly fascinating. Some sliding their chairs imperceptibly away from the New York congresswoman. Ocasio-Cortez, feeding on the energy, grabbed another stack of papers. It didn't matter what was written on them, they were props for the performance. She hurled them toward Cruz. They fluttered, falling short, a theatrical but ultimately ineffective gesture. "You want to lecture me about serving the people?" Her voice climbed higher, edging toward a screech, while Texans froze in their homes. "You were sipping margaritas in Cancun, while children died for lack of heat. You were working on your tan." The gallery's response was immediate. A deafening roar. "Shame, shame, shame." Her chief of staff, standing just off to the side, tried to catch her eye, to make some subtle gesture to pull back. She was going too hard, too fast, burning too hot, but she shook him off like an annoying fly. This was her moment, her triumph, her vindication. "You represent everything wrong with this system." She was pacing now, a caged lion, unable to contain the righteous energy. Rich politicians who serve themselves while working families suffer. Cruz continued writing his notes. He didn't even look up. That dismissal, that calm, infuriated her more than any counterattack could have. She leaned over her table, getting too close to the microphone. Feedback screeched through the speakers, making everyone wince. Security tensed. The squad stood, hands raised, ready to intervene if security dared to touch their leader. A congressional aide passed Cruz a folder. Plain manila, utterly unremarkable. He set it on the table without opening it, finished his note, and set down his pen with a soft, definitive click. "You flew to Mexico while your state suffered." Ocasio-Cortez delivered what she was certain was the final, fatal blow. "You abandoned them. You're a coward who only serves the rich." She stood, breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion and righteousness. The room had fallen silent. save for the dying echoes of her supporters. This was it, the viral clip, the soundbite that would be shared millions of times. The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez politically destroyed Ted Cruz on live television. She was completely, utterly unaware that she had just walked, with religious fervor, directly into a meticulously constructed trap. The room slowly, painfully, quieted. The chants died away. Cruz finished his final note with the same deliberate care. He set down his pen. He removed his glasses. He began cleaning them again with his handkerchief. Each methodical swipe of the cloth stretching the silence until it was thin and brittle, ready to snap. Finally, he looked up. His voice was Texas calm, as mild as milk, as conversational as discussing the weather. "Congresswoman," he asked, "are you quite finished?" The simplicity of the question was devastating. It was the tone of a teacher asking a toddler if they were done with their tantrum. It suggested he had all the time in the world, that her entire, passionate, room-shaking fury was merely an interruption to be politely endured before the adults could resume their conversation. Ocasio-Cortez opened her mouth, ready to continue the assault. Cruz held up one finger. "Wait." He reached for the manila folder. The plain, unremarkable folder. The folder that, based on the way every Republican in the room was now leaning forward in their seat, clearly contained something terrible. The folder that, based on the way the Democrats were shrinking back, was about to change the entire narrative. He opened the folder with a theatrical slowness that was, in itself, a form of torture. The room held its collective breath. With the precise, unhurried motion of a surgeon, he pulled out a photograph, an 8x10, glossy, professional quality print. He held it up so the entire room, every camera, every spectator, could see it. It was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, captured in a moment of supposed triumph. She was bathed in the flashbulbs of the Met Gala, wearing a flowing white gown, and emblazoned across the back in blazing red letters, like a brand, was her signature slogan, "Tax the Rich." Her arms were raised, posing for the cameras, smiling at the most exclusive, expensive, and elitist party in America. The gallery's cheers, which had been poised to restart, died as if someone had cut the power. The silence that followed was so complete, so profound, that the faint, electronic buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead became an audible hum. Somewhere in the back, a person coughed, and it sounded as loud as a gunshot. Ocasio-Cortez froze. Her hand, which had been raised mid-gesture, pointing an accusing finger, simply hung in the air. Her confident, righteous smile didn't just fade, it cracked, like thin ice in a sudden spring thaw. Her other hand fumbled for the table, needing something solid, something real to hold onto. The world had just tilted on its axis. "Before we discuss my travel arrangements, Congresswoman," Cruz said quietly, his voice carrying with perfect clarity in the vacuum of silence, "perhaps we should discuss yours. Specifically, your attendance at the most expensive party in America, as a guest of the very billionaires you claim to despise." He let the words breathe. He let them sink in. He let the C-SPAN cameras capture the precise moment her face transformed from flushed with righteous anger to a sickly, pale white of dawning horror. She gripped the table harder, her knuckles whitening. She tried to regain control, to redirect, to salvage a situation that was deteriorating with astonishing speed. This is about your corruption. Not mine, but the power, the righteous thunder, had drained from her voice like water from a cracked cup. This is a distraction from the real issues. Is it? Cruz asked, with that same infuriating calm. He set the photo down and pulled out another document. This one was not a glossy picture. It was thick, official, bearing the seal of the United States Congress. "This," he said, holding it up, "is from the House Ethics Committee. A bipartisan committee, I might add, released just last month." If the photo had drained the color from her face, this document seemed to pull the very blood from her. She knew exactly what was in that report. She had spent sleepless nights dreading this precise moment. Her legal team had assured her it would blow over. "It's a slap on the wrist," they'd said. The progressive media had promised to bury it. Her squad had sworn to stand by her, to decry it as a partisan witch hunt. But here it was, in Ted Cruz's hands, on national television, in front of God and C-SPAN and everyone. Her eyes darted to her allies. Her backup choir. Ilhan Omar suddenly refused to meet her gaze, studying her phone with an intensity that suggested it held the secrets of the universe. Rashida Tlaib was examining her own notes as if for the first time. Ayanna Pressley had discovered something truly fascinating about the ceiling tiles. She was alone. "You want to talk about serving the rich?" Cruz continued, his voice never rising, never showing a hint of triumph. Just presenting facts with the cold, patient calm of a prosecutor who knows the verdict is already decided. "Let's talk about who paid for your dress that night. Who paid for your professional styling? Who paid for the ticket for your boyfriend to attend?" Her hand trembled as it reached for her water glass. It was empty. She'd knocked it over an hour ago in her dramatic performance. The water had long since soaked into her papers, warping them into a pathetic, pulpy mess. Her aide, his own hands shaking, rushed forward with a replacement. She drank too fast, coughed, and water dribbled down her chin. Cruz stacked more folders on his table. Many folders. A whole stack of them. Each one a potential landmine. Each one presumably filled with more ammunition. More evidence. More destruction. "Congresswoman," he said, and his tone was almost gentle now. Almost sad. Like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "You attacked me for one trip to Cancun with my family. Fair enough. Politicians are fair game. I can take the criticism." He opened the first folder with deliberate care. "But what you're about to learn is this. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to present 4 years of your ethics violations. Your family's enrichment. Your champagne socialist lifestyle. Funded by the very people you claim to fight." The pause seemed to stretch for an eternity. The room was frozen. "Shall we begin?" Cruz asked, his voice still devastatingly conversational. "With who really paid for your Met Gala appearance? Or should we start with the $6 in suspicious payments to your boyfriend?" Ocasio-Cortez's hand reached for the table again. But this time, her knees buckled slightly. A chair scraped as her chief of staff moved to catch her if she fell. But she didn't fall. Not physically. The socialist revolutionary who had entered the room to destroy Ted Cruz was about to discover she had actually walked into her own political execution. And the man she'd come to attack was simply the executioner, patiently reading the charges. The trap had been sprung. The aces had been revealed. The projection screen behind Cruz lit up with devastating simplicity. On the left, AOC in her "tax the rich" dress, smiling at the cameras. On the right, the official House Ethics Committee report, with the words, "Violations found," circled in red. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. The split-screen image on the projection screen was a masterstroke of political theater. A devastatingly simple visual argument that needed no narration. On the left, Ocasio-Cortez in the flowing, "tax the rich" gown, smiling, triumphant, the revolutionary at the ball. On the right, the cold, black and white text of the House Ethics Committee report. The finding, "Violations found," a stark, bureaucratic condemnation. Cruz stood, moving to the projection screen with the easy, unhurried confidence of a professor about to deliver a lecture he had taught 100 times. He picked up a laser pointer, and the small red dot danced on the screen like an accusation. "Let me walk you through what happened," he began, his voice remaining conversational, almost friendly. This was not a tirade, it was a dissection. September 2021, the Congresswoman attends the Met Gala. She wears a custom-designed gown by Aurora James. Professional hair and makeup. Jewelry loaned from designers, the works. Click. The photo of AOC on the red carpet enlarged, filling the screen. Her smile was brilliant. Her pose, perfect. Her message, blazing. She tells the world, Cruz continued, that she's there to make a statement. Tax the rich. She's crashing the party of the elite to deliver a message directly to them. He paused, letting the dramatic weight of her narrative build before surgically dismantling it. Except, she wasn't crashing anything. She was invited, personally invited, by Anna Wintour, by the hosts, by the very people she was supposedly there to protest. The irony, he noted dryly, was apparently lost on her. Click. The timeline advanced. 2022. People start asking reasonable questions. Who paid for all this? The dress alone was custom made. One of a kind. The styling costs thousands. And that ticket for her boyfriend, how exactly did that work? Click. The Congresswoman assured everyone, on Twitter. In statements, it's all handled. I'll pay for everything. Don't worry. His voice dropped slightly, forcing the room to lean in. Except she didn't pay. Not fully. Not honestly. Click. 2023. The Office of Congressional Ethics, an independent, nonpartisan body, begins investigating. They start looking at receipts, talking to vendors, following the money, and they found something interesting. He turned to face Ocasio-Cortez directly. She was still gripping the table, knuckles white. You accepted gifts you weren't entitled to accept. You took thousands of dollars in services and goods. And you only started paying, partially, after the investigation was launched. This is a distraction, she exploded. A reflexive, desperate parry. You're manufacturing a scandal to avoid discussing. July 2025. Cruz spoke over her, his voice never rising but carrying an authority that cut her off mid-sentence. Last month, the Ethics Committee, a bipartisan body, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, released their findings. Not allegations, not accusations, findings. He picked up the thick, official report from his table. He adjusted his glasses and began to read with careful, surgical precision. Quote, Representative Ocasio-Cortez violated House rules by accepting impermissible gifts associated with her attendance at the Met Gala in 2021. He looked up over his glasses, letting the words land. Not allegedly violated, not may have violated, violated, past tense, confirmed, official. The murmurs in the gallery were no longer cheers, they were the confused, anxious whispers of a crowd realizing the script had been flipped. But let's get specific, Cruz said, moving to a new slide. Let's talk about that +1. Let's talk about Mr. Riley Roberts. A photo appeared on screen, Riley, in his tuxedo, smiling nervously beside Ocasio-Cortez at the gala. The Congresswoman's boyfriend at the time. Now her fiancé. I understand. Congratulations on the engagement. By the way, the pleasantry was a twist of the knife. House rules, Cruz continued, are crystal clear about this. Click. The actual text of the House rule appeared on screen. A member may be accompanied by one family member, who is either the spouse or a dependent of the member. He emphasized the words, spouse, or dependent child. Boyfriend doesn't count. Partner doesn't count. The rule is clear. He let that sink in. But she brought him anyway. Got him in free to an event where tickets cost, well, we've established what those tickets cost. Ocasio-Cortez's voice was shrill now. Desperate. We've been together for years. We live together. We're practically. But you're not married. Cruz responded with devastating calm. And here's where it gets really interesting. New documents flashed on the screen. Official forms, damning in their contradictions, on some paperwork, specifically the paperwork to get Riley Roberts into the Met Gala. You listed him as your spouse. A red circle appeared around the word spouse on one form. But on other paperwork, specifically your federal financial disclosure forms, the ones where spouses are required to report all their income and assets, you listed him as not your spouse. A red circle appeared around the empty space where his name should have been. The room erupted. The contradiction was too blatant, too obvious to ignore. So which is it, Congresswoman? Cruz asked, his tone one of mild, curious confusion. Is Riley Roberts your spouse when it gets him into fancy parties, but not your spouse when it would require financial transparency? Her mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Oh, and one more thing, Cruz said, as if just remembering. This, not spouse, of yours. Your, sometimes spouse. He's had a congressional pin since you took office. A new photo showed Riley wearing the distinctive pin that grants access to restricted areas of the Capitol. You know what this pin means? It means access to the United States Capitol. To rooms where sensitive information is discussed. It's supposed to be for members and their staff, and their spouses. But Riley Roberts isn't your spouse. You've made that abundantly clear on the forms you sign under penalty of perjury. He let the implications of the security breach hang in the air before returning to the original sin, the dress. The dress itself, he said, was custom couture. The Ethics Committee investigated thoroughly. They determined that the dress, the accessories, the complete ensemble, It was worth far more than what you paid. Receipts, spreadsheets, comparisons. The designer gave you what we call in the business a sweetheart deal. A significant discount. In Congress, we call that an impermissible gift. Hair and makeup services, provided by professionals who charge thousands. You paid a fraction of the rate. Jewelry loaned to you, worth tens of thousands, never properly disclosed. Hotel stay at the Carlyle, one of New York's most exclusive. Costs covered by third parties. Never disclosed. His voice took on that sad, disappointed quality again. And when did you start paying these vendors? When did you finally decide to settle at least some of these bills? He paused. After the ethics investigation began. Only then. Only when caught. He shook his head slowly. You wore a dress saying, "Tax the rich," while accepting thousands in undisclosed gifts from the rich. You attacked wealth inequality while embodying it in designer clothes and borrowed diamonds. The silence in the room was profound. This wasn't a right-wing conspiracy. This was a bipartisan committee. This was their own party's findings. The committee calculated what you still owe, Cruz said, holding up a notepad. Nearly $3. But it's not really about the money. Is it? It's about the principle. You demanded others pay their fair share, while you dodged yours. Cruz organized his papers, closing that folder with a soft thud that sounded final. He then reached for another folder. Thicker, heavier. But Congresswoman, he said, and the room tensed again. The Met Gala. That's just the opening act. He pulled out bank statements. FEC filings. A flowchart. Let's discuss your boyfriend again. Specifically, let's talk about the $6 your campaign funneled to him through a political action committee. A PAC controlled by your own chief of staff. Ocasio-Cortez made a sound. A small gasp. This was the nightmare. The Met Gala was one thing, hypocrisy. Bad optics. This was different. This was campaign finance. This was corruption. Cruz was connecting the dots, revealing that it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern, a lifestyle, a fundamental disconnect between what she preached and how she lived. The projection screen, which had just been displaying the damning flowchart of campaign money, flickered and changed. The new split screen was, if possible, even more brutal. On the left, a news headline from 2019. AOC celebrates as Amazon abandons NYC. The accompanying photo showed her smiling, triumphant, at a rally. On the right, another headline from the same week, 25. jobs lost as Amazon cancels New York HQ. The photo showed dejected construction workers, their hard hats in their hands. The contrast required no narration, but Cruz provided it anyway, his voice taking on a different quality. The anger was still there, but it was now tinged with a deep, profound disappointment, like a teacher watching a brilliant student deliberately fail a test. Let's go back to 2019, he said, stepping away from his table. A different scandal, but the same pattern of ideological performance over human consequence. Amazon announces they are choosing New York City for their second headquarters. HQ2. He let the number hang in the air. 25,000 jobs. He repeated it, slower. Let that number sink in. Not 1,000 jobs. Not 10,000. 25,000 jobs. 25,000 paychecks for 25,000 families in your district, in your city. Families who could finally pay rent without choosing between food and medicine. Parents who could send their kids to college. 25,000 reasons for hope in communities that desperately needed it. Video began to play. It was Ocasio-Cortez, megaphone in hand, at a rally, her face a mask of righteous fury. We don't need their dirty money. We don't need Jeff Bezos. We don't need corporate greed in our neighborhoods. The crowd in the video roared. She called it corporate greed. Cruz narrated over the clip. She organized protests. She lobbied other politicians. She became the face of the resistance. And she won. Click. The screen changed to a photo of the empty, desolate lot in Long Island City where the headquarters would have been built. Construction equipment sat idle. For lease, signs hung like flags of surrender. Amazon pulled out. February 2019. Gone. 25,000 jobs vanished like smoke. Click. Her tweet from that day appeared. Blown up for the world to see. Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated Everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world. She celebrated, Cruz said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. She did a victory lap on Twitter. She had won. But who, exactly, had won? Not the 25,000 workers. Not the construction crews. Not the small businesses that would have thrived. They lost. Those weren't real jobs. Ocasio-Cortez surged to her feet. Her voice raw. It was corporate welfare. It was about principles. Principles don't pay rent. Congresswoman, Cruz interrupted, his voice cutting through her defense. Principles don't feed children. And tell that to the union leaders. The construction workers. The local families who begged you to take the deal. He pulled out a set of older, weathered-looking documents. But here is what makes this truly, breathtakingly hypocritical. Let's go back further. 2012. A photo of a much younger Ocasio-Cortez appeared, smiling, entrepreneurial, next to a small stack of children's books. A young Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez runs a small publishing company, Brook Avenue Press. Idealistic, the American dream in action. And what? He held up an application form, the letterhead clearly visible. Did she apply for? He zoomed in on the document. Tax breaks, business incentives, government subsidies, the exact same type of benefits she attacked Amazon for seeking. The room, or what was left of it, erupted in murmurs. Tax breaks for Alexandria, the small-time entrepreneur. Good. Necessary. Fair. Cruz summarized, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Tax breaks for Amazon, creating 25,000 jobs. Evil. Corporate greed. Unacceptable. He shook his head, as if in genuine disbelief. After Amazon left, the congresswoman tweeted something that revealed either a stunning ignorance of basic economics or a stunning level of dishonesty. I'm honestly not sure which is worse. Her tweet reappeared. We were subsidizing those jobs, so we can invest those $3 billion in our district in places like the Bronx. She thought, Cruz said, genuinely believed, or at least claimed to believe, that New York City had $3 billion sitting in a bank account. And that by rejecting Amazon, they could just redirect that money. That's not how tax incentives work. The money doesn't exist. It's future taxes you agree not to collect in exchange for even more future taxes from all the new economic activity. The mayor tried to explain this to her. The governor tried to explain it. But she knew better. She'd taken an economics class in college. He let the sheer arrogance of it settle before moving to his next point. But wait, he said, because the hypocrisy gets so much richer. Literally. A new photo appeared. Ocasio-Cortez, climbing into a gleaming white Tesla Model 3. First, Cruz said, let's watch this. A video clip played. Ocasio-Cortez at a town hall. Passionate, railing against corporate welfare. We gave money to Tesla. We gave money to a ton of people and we got no return on our investment that the public made in creating these technologies. The video stopped. Cruz gestured to the photo of her in her new luxury car. She attacked Tesla for taking government subsidies. She called it a bad investment. Then, she personally gave them tens of thousands of dollars for their luxury model. The car of choice for the very tech bros and wealthy elites she claims to despise. More photos appeared. The Tesla parked at her apartment. The Tesla at the Capitol. And then, one zoomed in, particularly damning detail. And where does she park this luxury car? Why, here it is, outside a Whole Foods in Washington, D.C. He paused. Whole Foods, the grocery store owned by Amazon. The same Amazon she drove out of New York. The same Jeff Bezos she demonized. She attacked Amazon, killed 25,000 jobs, and then gave them her business anyway. Just like she attacked Tesla. Then gave them her money. He zoomed in further on the photo. Oh, and notice? That's a no parking zone. Congressional plates. So she knows she won't be towed. Rules for thee, but not for me. When called out, he continued, she claimed, and I'm reading her exact words. It was the only EV that could get me from New York to Washington on one charge. Click. A detailed comparison chart appeared on screen, listing 17 different electric vehicles available at the time. Here, Cruz said, are 8 other models, all with equal or better range. most costing half as much. Several made by American union workers. The kind of workers she claims to represent. But they don't have the same status. Do they? They don't signal, "I've made it," when you pull up to Georgetown restaurants. He returned to his seat, his voice growing cold. You didn't save New York $3 billion. You cost them their future. You cost 25,000 families their chance at a better life. All for a victory that was nothing more than a boost for your own political brand. He closed the Amazon, Tesla folder with deliberate finality. The room was hushed, absorbing the weight of the cumulative hypocrisy. Cruz reached for the last folder. This one seemed different. He touched it almost reluctantly. And his expression shifted, the prosecutorial anger fading into something harder to read. Something almost sad. On the tab, written in marker, was one word, abuela. Congresswoman, he said, his voice dropping, everything so far has been about money, policy, and hypocrisy. Standard political scandals. He opened the new folder. But this next part, this is different. This isn't about economics. This is about family. This is about character. A photo appeared on the screen. An elderly woman, standing in a small house in Puerto Rico. The roof had partially collapsed. Buckets littered the floor, catching rainwater. You could see the sky through the ceiling. Let's talk about your grandmother. Ocasio-Cortez's eyes squeezed shut. Her hand went to her mouth. This was it, the one she had been dreading. The one that wasn't about politics. The one that was personal, human, and indefensible. The split screen on the projection wall was the most brutal of them all. A moral indictment captured in two images. On the right, the photo of Ocasio-Cortez at the Met Gala, smiling in her custom, tax-the-rich gown. The epitome of elite, performative politics. And on the left, the photo she herself had tweeted, her abuela, her grandmother, standing frail and elderly in a room in Puerto Rico. The ceiling had collapsed. The walls were stained with water and mold. Buckets were scattered across the floor to catch the rain that fell freely into her home. Years after Hurricane Maria. Cruz's voice was quiet now, almost gentle, which only amplified the horror of the subject. June 2021, he began. The Congresswoman tweets about her grandmother. The tweet itself appeared on screen. Her own words forming the news. Just over a week ago. My abuela fell ill. I went to PR to see her. This is her home. Hurricane Maria relief hasn't arrived. Trump blocked relief. People are being forced to flee ancestral homes and developers are taking them. She posted these photos, Cruz said, looking at the committee, of her own grandmother's suffering. And she blamed President Trump. She called it a systemic failure of government. She talked about how Puerto Rico had been abandoned. He paused, looking directly at Ocasio-Cortez, whose head was now bowed, her hands covering her face. And you know what? She was partially right. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide, confused by the sudden agreement. She was right, Cruz continued. The hurricane relief was inadequate. The response was slow. There were real failures. But then, people started asking questions. Reasonable questions. Obvious questions. Twitter responses from ordinary Americans, not pundits, flashed on the screen. You make $174 a year. Why is your grandmother living like this? You drive a $50 Tesla and wear designer clothes to galas. But you can't fix your own abuela's roof? My grandmother would never live in these conditions if I had the money you have. She tried to explain. Cruz narrated, tweeted back that people didn't understand. That it was about systemic problems, not her personal responsibility. That people didn't grasp the complexities of family. Cruz's voice hardened. No, Congresswoman, we understand perfectly. In my culture, he said, in your culture, supposedly, family comes first, always, before politics, before career, before everything. My abuela, I would have lived in a cardboard box before I let her live in a house with a collapsed roof. That's not heroic. That's just family. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. You make more money than 90% of Americans. You have resources. You have access. And your grandmother, your own flesh and blood, lived in ruins while you used her suffering for political Twitter points. But Congresswoman, his voice dropped to barely a whisper, forcing the silent room to strain to hear. It gets worse. So much worse. New screenshots appeared. A GoFundMe page. Conservatives saw your grandmother's plight. Cruz said, his voice laced with disbelief. People who disagree with your politics. People you attack every single day. People you call fascists. A man named Matt Walsh, a conservative commentator, decided to do something. He started a GoFundMe campaign to repair your grandmother's home. He let the next number land with the weight of a moral judgment. Within hours, strangers began donating. People who had never met your abuela. People who despise your politics. But they saw a human being in need. They raised, he said, pausing for effect, over $100. Gasps rippled through the few remaining spectators. $100. Enough to rebuild her home. To give her dignity, safety, and comfort. The pause stretched, heavy and agonizing. Everyone in the room could feel what was coming. And your family, Cruz said, his voice finally breaking with something that sounded like genuine, cold anger, rejected it. They refused the money. All of it. Told GoFundMe they would not accept a penny. The campaign was shut down. The money was returned. A Puerto Rican woman, who had been sitting silently in the gallery, stood up. Vergüenza, she whispered, the word, shame, hanging in the air. You're no Boricua. You're no familia. You are a fraud. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Do you know why? Cruz demanded, his voice rising for the first time. Because accepting help from conservatives would hurt your political brand. Your grandmother could have had a safe home, a dry bedroom, a roof that didn't leak. But that would require admitting that conservatives, your enemies, are capable of human decency. And that admission would complicate your political narrative. So she kept living in that collapsed house. While you made political speeches. While you wore designer clothes. While you drove luxury cars. He moved to a whiteboard. A simple prop for a devastatingly simple piece of math. Your salary, $174. He wrote the number. Cost to repair your grandmother's home? Estimates were around $20. He circled the number. That is less than 2 months of your take-home pay. You could have fixed her house and still made your Tesla payment. You spent thousands on hair, makeup, and styling for one night at the Met Gala. That money could have put a new roof over your grandmother's head. But being seen at the right party was more important. He sat on the edge of the table, his prosecutorial demeanor gone, replaced by the weariness of a man stating an ugly, obvious truth. You preach socialism, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It's your entire ideology. Your grandmother needed a roof. You had the ability to provide it. But you didn't. Socialism for thee, but not for me. You demand the rich pay their fair share. That's your signature issue. Tax the rich. But when your own abuela needed your fair share, you said it was someone else's problem. The government's job. He stood, walking toward her, stopping at a respectful distance. You talk endlessly about privilege. But look at you. Designer clothes, luxury cars, exclusive parties, a congressional salary. You are the privilege you claim to fight. You are the inequality you claim to oppose. You're not fighting the system. Congresswoman, you are the system. I came here today not to defend my trip to Cancun. That was a mistake, and I've owned it. I came here to show America who you really are. He looked at her, his face a mask of pity. You're not a revolutionary. You're not a champion of the people. You're a champagne socialist, an elite playing dress up as a radical, a privileged person who weaponized other people's suffering, including your own grandmother's, for personal political advancement. You are exactly what you claim to fight. And now, everyone knows it. The committee room had been transformed. What had, only hours before, been a packed arena crackling with the electric energy of revolution, was now a hollow, echoing chamber. The gallery was less than a quarter full. The "Tax the Rich" t-shirts were gone, replaced by empty seats. The squad, Ilhan, Rashida, Ayana, had long since slipped out through a side door, each finding some urgent, sudden business elsewhere. They had come for a coronation and fled an execution. And at the center of it all, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat alone at her table, a portrait of total political desolation. She had removed her designer jacket at some point. It lay crumpled on the chair behind her. A casualty of the battle. Her silk blouse was wrinkled and stained with sweat. The professional makeup, applied that morning to project an image of authority, was now a ruin, streaked with tears and perspiration. running in tracks down her face like war paint washed away by rain. Her carefully styled hair was in disarray. She stared at the scattered, water-warped papers on her table. Her phone, which had buzzed incessantly for the first hour, sat face down, deathly silent, or perhaps she had finally silenced it. It no longer mattered. The verdict was in. One of the few remaining reporters, a young journalist who still believed in the mission, audibly gasped as he looked at his phone. He showed his screen to the person next to him. A wave of realization, a digital aftershock, rippled through the press corps. The projection screen, Cruz's weapon all day, lit up one last time. But it wasn't Cruz controlling it. A committee staffer, seeing the new information, displayed what was happening in the world outside that room. The trends on X, formerly Twitter, were brutal. #1 trending worldwide. #AOC exposed. #2 trending. #Champagne Socialist. #3 trending. #Abuela. #4 trending. #Riley Roberts. #6 trending. #Met Gala Ethics. The platform she had mastered, the digital battlefield where she was an undefeated general, had turned on her with breathtaking speed. Tweets scrolled by, a torrent of betrayal. I donated $50 to her campaign when I had $60 in my bank account. While she was paying her boyfriend and wearing designer clothes. I feel like such a fool. My abuela is my world. I worked 2 jobs to help her. AOC makes $174,000 and let hers live in ruins. Vergüenza. The tax the rich dress while accepting thousands in gifts from the rich is the most perfect, damning metaphor for her entire career. TikTok videos were already viral. Split screens of her grandmother's home and the Met Gala. Video essays dissecting the $6 boyfriend payments. Compilations of her attacking Tesla and then driving one. The organizational responses were rolling in. A tidal wave of disavowals. Justice Democrats, the group that had launched her career. We are reviewing these deeply troubling revelations. The Democratic Socialists of America. Members are expected to uphold the highest standards. The Congressional Progressive Caucus. All members must be held to the same ethical standards. It was a political quarantine. The media's shift was just as swift. CNN. Questions mount over Ocasio-Cortez's ethics. MSNBC. Democrats worry AOC scandal damages progressive brand. The New York Times. From rising star to pariah. Ethics violations reveal pattern of enrichment. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood one final time. Her legs visibly shaking. Her voice, raw from hours of shouting and crying, was barely a whisper. She looked at the cameras. Her last, desperate appeal. This, she swallowed, trying to find her old fire. This is what they do. This is what they do to strong women of color who dare to challenge the system. It was a reflex, the last arrow in her quiver. But the room was immune. No, ma'am. The voice came from the gallery. A black woman, dressed in a professional suit, stood up. She looked composed, powerful, and profoundly tired. Tired of watching her identity be used as a shield. Don't you do that, the woman said, her voice measured but firm, carrying an authority that Ocasio-Cortez no longer possessed. Don't you hide behind us. Don't use women of color as your shield when you get caught being corrupt. Ocasio-Cortez stopped, stunned into silence. I'm a black woman, the woman continued, stepping into the aisle. I worked 2 jobs to take care of my mother. I have been fighting for real change my whole life. And what you did? That's not about being Latina. That's not about challenging power. That's about being a hypocrite. That's about using our hope, our trust, for your own enrichment. Own it. Take responsibility. But do not hide behind me. She turned, her head held high, and walked out of the room. Her exit was more powerful than any speech. The last few remaining supporters in the gallery looked at each other. Their faces a mixture of confusion, betrayal, and anger. They followed the woman out. An exodus of the disillusioned. The committee chairman, his face grim, banged his gavel one final time. This hearing is adjourned. The committee will reconvene tomorrow to discuss appropriate sanctions. Sanctions. The word hung in the air. Official. Permanent. Ocasio-Cortez began to gather her papers. Her hands trembling so badly she couldn't stack them. They slipped, falling to the floor. She bent to pick them up, dropped more, and finally just gave up, leaving them scattered like the ruins of her career. Her chief of staff was nowhere to be seen. She walked toward the exit, each step an agony. The designer jacket, the symbol of her status, remained crumpled on the chair. In the hallway, a group of young Latinas in Boricua Power t-shirts saw her coming. One by one, they turned their backs on her. A silent, devastating protest. The photographers were waiting, a wall of flashes, not the friendly ones, but the vultures, documenting the political death. She tried to cover her face, but it was too late. The image was immortalized, disheveled, crying, broken, and utterly alone. Her legacy had been rewritten in 4 hours. Not the voice of a generation. Not the future of the party. Just another politician who preached one thing and lived another. Meanwhile, in his office, Ted Cruz watched the news coverage. There was no triumph on his face. Just exhaustion and a profound, tragic sadness. His aide entered. "Senator, you're trending. They're calling it the most devastating takedown in congressional history." Cruz waved him off. "Turn it off. I didn't come here to destroy her. I came here to expose hypocrisy." He looked at a photo on his desk of his own family. His own abuela, smiling, in a safe, well-maintained home. She could have been authentic, he said quietly, more to himself than his aide. She had the platform. She had the opportunity. He closed the final folder. The one marked, AOC. What a tragic waste of potential.